Today I'm going to tell you why you need to keep things simple in high-ticket sales if you want to make money. The main problem that I see over and over again in conversations from international high-ticket closers is that they tend to use sophisticated vocabulary and complex sentence structures, which actually come from like this reward system that is incentivized in academic settings. But what I can tell you for a fact is that this kind of dynamics actually don't work in real scenarios in high-ticket sales. So they are really destroying your conversions. Prospects don't buy from you because they just don't understand what you're saying. The key to success in US markets is to simplify your message. The big misconception is that international closers believe that sophisticated vocabulary and business jargon make them sound professional and credible. But the reality is that to American buyers, complex language sounds robotic, confusing, and like you're reading from a script. It basically builds a wall between you and the prospects. When you choose to overcomplicate your language during a sales call, the brain has to work harder to process unfamiliar terminology, which overloads its processing capacity during a sales call. Neuroscience shows that when you use overly complicated language, that actually activates the same brain regions as stress responses. So you're literally stressing your prospects out, and stressed prospects don't buy, they escape. So when you use weird expressions like synergetic solutions, paradigm shifts, or ROI optimization strategies, these cause prospects to mentally check out. Other examples of these robotic word choices could be things like utilize instead of use, facilitate instead of help, or implement instead of do. The key idea to bring home here is that clarity creates trust, trust creates sales, and the person who communicates the clearest always wins. There is a huge misconception among the closer community relating to the idea that giving more information and being thorough demonstrates expertise and builds confidence. But the reality is that over-explaining features, benefits, and processes sometimes overwhelms prospects with too much information, and this could cause them to freeze and postpone decisions. I always say that if you can't explain your core value in less than 30 seconds, you've already lost their attention. The brain can only hold about 7 pieces of information in working memory at once. So lengthy explanations lead to incomplete understanding as the brain discards the information. Prospects buy outcomes, not processes or methodologies. They don't really care about how your program works. They care about the results that they will get. So the idea here is that when you constrain the information, this is a good thing because it forces your brain to simplify things to like the minimum amount of information, and the 30-second time limit of an elevator pitch forces you to distill your message down to its most essential high-impact elements, cutting out all the jargon and all the filler. So if you were to break down everything to like the most simple formula, you would end up with just 3 simple elements: the problem, the solution, and the results. The problem is what hurts the prospect right now. The solution is what fixes their specific problem, and the result is how their life changes after their problem is fixed. You can try to overcomplicate things as much as you want, but this is what it all comes down to. Now, let me give you an example of how this would look like on the real world. All right, so this is an example of overly complicated language. So we provide comprehensive digital marketing optimization solutions to enhance your online presence and maximize conversion potential. Now, compare that to this very simple sentence. Your business isn't getting enough customers online. We fix your website and your ads, so you get more sales. Now, I want to stress the difference between smart-sounding closers and successful closers. So the highest earning closers often sound the least intelligent because they use simple elementary level language and they prioritize connection over impressing the prospects. On the other hand, using overcomplicated language can make you seem disconnected from the prospect's real world problems, and they may feel you are actually speaking from theory and not experience, which completely breaks the trust. I know that this is a very counterintuitive idea, but the truth is that it's very easy to use jargon and complicated language like that. It's actually way more difficult to take a very complex idea and make it simple and digestible, which requires a deep understanding and confidence in the topic. The main thing that you need to remember is that your goal isn't to sound smart yourself. It's to make the prospect feel smart for being able to easily understand your solution. The result of this is prospects that end up buying from you immediately compared to confused prospects that need some time to digest all the information that you just provided. Now, you need need to distinguish between the necessary details that you need to provide, so that is what the prospect actually needs to know in order for them to buy, and the unnecessary complexity, that means everything that you know about the offer, because you don't need to spill out every single thing that you know about the offer on every single phone call. Now, I'm going to give you a few warning signs that will actually indicate that you're being too complex during your sales calls. The first thing is using too many acronyms. So sometimes you assume that the prospect is completely familiar with a bunch of different acronyms, but sometimes, maybe the person is starting out during their journey, so they might not be as familiar. You have to avoid trying to assume that they know every single acronym related to the industry. The second problem is spending too much time explaining processes and not outcomes. So describing how your solution works instead of what results it delivers. So you need to avoid leaning too much on describing how your solution works instead of what results it delivers. Another indicator that could tell you that you're being too complex with your language is using multiple subpoints. So this is when you're structuring your pitch like a college lecture, which could very easily overwhelm your prospects. Also, another thing that you should be looking out for is using too much industry jargon. So this comes down to the idea of using words that might sound professional to you, but may mean nothing to the prospects. And then finally, another giveaway of this overcomplexity would be using lengthy setups. So this is when you're taking too long to get to the point, causing prospects to lose interest. So a very simple practical test that you can do to test for your own clarity on your delivery is the grandma test. So if your grandmother wouldn't understand your explanation, then it's probably too complex for our prospects. Also, another exercise that you can do is to try to come up with an explanation of your solution as if you were trying to explain it to a 5-year-old. So the cool thing about this is that children demand simple words and clear explanations, and this actually forces you to find the absolute core of your message. Let me give you an example of this in action. So this would be an example of a complex alternative, right? So imagine this sentence. Our platform leverages artificial intelligence algorithms to optimize your customer acquisition funnel. Now, the simplified 5-year-old version would sound like, your computer watches how people shop on your website. It learns what makes people buy things, then it shows your website to more people who want to buy. Now, there are other additional simplification exercises that you could implement in your delivery to make this work. One of them would be the one-sentence summary. Basically, if you come up with a single sentence that clarifies the solution that you have to offer, this forces you to identify your single most important value proposition. Another approach that you could take to explain things simply would be using the friend at a bar test, which basically encourages you to use the simple, direct language that you would use with friends at a hangout. When you start simplifying your language, you should be expecting to see your conversion rates skyrocketing really fast. The change is immediate because understanding leads to faster, more confident decisions. So the compounding benefits of your clarity and your delivery is actually very evident in different areas. So first of all, you build faster rapport, so prospects feel understood. Then also you will tend to get more referrals because satisfied clients can easily explain what you do to their networks. And then most importantly, you will get higher client satisfaction because expectations are clear from the beginning, eliminating the disappointments. So if you drill this down into your brain, you will start having a huge advantage over other international closers, and you will build trust with clarity and a business that grows through referrals. Sales rewards simple communication that prospects understand immediately. Clarity creates trust, and trust creates sales. I want you to start today. Record your pitch and apply the 5-year-old test. Strip away all the jargon and complexity and focus on clear, simple outcomes. Clear communication isn't dumbing down, it's powering up your sales results.